Welcome
Hola.
to Kit 118A. Super exciting for us here today. I'm in, if you're seeing my background, I'm in Tahoe, California. For those of you who are in California, you know that it's a mere 3 hours or so away from the Bay Area where I'm usually located. Yeah, it's so wonderful. I know I don't need to drive anywhere after this, and I get to taste our brilliant six wines with
She
our
gets to drink them.
I get to drink them, so you won't see me spitting a lot today, I don't
There
think.
you go. There you go.
And I get to be here with you guys, our Master of the World family, and our amazing three Master Sommelier hosts. So I'm going to introduce everyone in a second. Just let us know where you're coming from today. Give us a shout out in the chat. We've got folks, I'm sure, from everywhere, and it's so great when we see the same faces. And I know it's graduation week, it's summer already, so if you're still here with us after so many sessions and hanging out with us, thank you for being here. We don't take you giving us time like this for granted, and we are really appreciative of that.
Yeah. Well, people can get on airplanes and start traveling places now as things are beginning to
Yeah, why would
slowly
you
but
need a
surely open
webinar?
up.
But you're here,
Yeah.
so we're
I'm
excited.
staying right here. I like this. This is great.
Or you could do your webinar from the plane, but you couldn't bring your own wine. You'd have to do it without that. It could be
Exactly.
spring money for the Wi-Fi, right?
Absolutely. Quick reminder, as you're texting us in your chat box, make sure you're doing it to all panelists and attendees. Because right now, Evan, Madeline, Tim, and I have the benefit of seeing where all you guys are from, but nobody else out there sees it. So we don't mind if you repost and tell everyone else. Make sure it's going out to all panelists and attendees.
And
So
I saw someone was here from Vegas. I'd be curious to know how hot it is day in Vegas because a friend of mine in Phoenix said it was 106 degrees last night. Ouch.
yeah,
Holy moly.
It
that is
is hot. That's all we get, Akeem? Hot. Okay.
Oh, there are no cicadas. One of our team members at Master of the World just had a wedding this past weekend, and in the cicada DC, I love or Virginia. So, all right, I think we're ready to get started. Thank you everybody for saying hello. Welcome. This is Kit 118A. This is your Master of the World family. This is your 14th webinar, our 16th kit. Welcome. If you're joining us and want to be a bit competitive and join the leaderboard, the code is CW72. You can start tasting. We have a very mobile responsive piece, and so you can hit start tasting and you should be able to enter in 118A and taste along with us. As usual, no questions will be unanswered. So whether they'll be answered live or they will be answered later on when we share the recording, please don't be afraid to ask. We would love for answers to come in and even like feedback, like the wine, didn't like the wine. Even if you didn't like something, we want to know, and that's really helpful for us. Virtual hugs, of course. Thank you already for telling us where you're coming from. Those are all encouraged. And without further ado, before we start on the first wine, I just want to give our fellow panelists a chance to start. And then before we move on to the next slide, I will tell you guys about a new feature. But before we do that, Evan Goldstein, will you say hello from wherever you are?
Hello, my name is Evan Goldstein. No. I'm in San Francisco today, everybody. It's warm, but not as warm as it's going to be tomorrow. And I would just encourage you, as Li Meng said, to engage and all that stuff. And, and wine is art. I mean, it's liquid art, and not every piece of art is going to, the Mona Lisa doesn't make everybody happy. So if there's a wine that you're not connecting with or whatever, that is totally cool. Do let us know. It's always important to get feedback. But we're delighted to have you with us and looking forward to your engagement.
Wonderful. Thanks, Evan. And then we have Madeline Triffon. Madeline?
Madeline Triffon rhymes with chiffon from perfect weather in Michigan. Well, people are always asking, how do you pronounce it? Triffon, chiffon. There we go.
There you go. There you go.
It is. I always check the dew point. It's very low today. No humidity. Yay. And I have to tell you, bravo to those of you who take a deep breath and ask what you think is probably an ignorant question, and at least half of the people who are with us are thinking the same thing. If we say something that doesn't make sense to you or you would like us to define, sometimes, frankly, we just forget to do that because we've been speaking this language for a long time. So just encouraging you.
Great. And we, of course, have Tim Gaiser. Tim, where are you coming from today?
From the teeming megapolis of Rio Rancho, New Mexico, where, I'm looking at Akeem Propatakis at 111 degrees. I'm thinking that's Phoenix or Vegas, but here in New Mexico, we get one really hot week out of the summer and this is it. It was 106 yesterday, 103, and it's going to be 102 today. So it's a good time to stay inside and do a tasting just like this. So looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Before I move on, I want to just tell you guys that we have some exciting things that are happening on our website and our tasting feature. We have the reveal button that we released, and then we also have hints that we released the last webinar. But in a week, we will actually release a downloadable printable tasting note. So if you want to remember the wine and some of you want to print it out and have a tasting note as you taste along, that will also be available. There are lots of new things coming out. The summertime is actually a really good time for us to be releasing a lot of new features. So I'm really excited for feedback as you get those. We will have, if you don't have the wine with you today, don't worry. We will have clues given during the tasting and you can play along even without wine. And we'll have polls. Please answer the polls. They are anonymous. You don't have to worry about Evan Goldstein knowing what you just thought this wine was. Everyone can just answer honestly, and the way you have it, it'll help with the teaching moments. All right, without further ado, Madeline, I'm going to kick it off to you for wine number 1.
I was going to say Evan may not know what the wine is, but Triffon Chiffon will. I'm just kidding. So that said, thank you, Li Meng, for the printable business, because those of us who like paper, right, and do recycle, applaud that. All right, everyone, I'm tasting with you. I'm going to be touching on the grid, but more importantly, I'm going to be describing just the way the wine is expressing itself to me right now. So appearance, always important, and a lot of people really gloss over it because it tells a story. And this one is so brilliant, it's almost silvered, and it's what I would call a true straw with easily perceivable green glints. The highlights are saying silver. I would add green to that, and just to remind us all, green in white wine telegraphs what? Youth. And the way that it moves in the glass is rather quick, and the rivulets are quick as well, so hold that thought. Then going to both the nose and the palate, so go ahead, I'm gonna remind myself, and why don't you do the same? On the nose, it is just an open book of peach, apricot, nectarine. I know I'm going down a little bit to the stone fruit, but that's what hits me first. I'll circle back to citrus. Definitively lime for me, aromatically, but also on the palate as well. Certainly fresh, certainly ripe. A little bit of zest, not a whole lot. A little green apple in there for sure. And then I'm going to jump on down to tropical, maybe a little bit of kiwi, but then, floral to me is as expressive as the stone fruit. At this particular tasting, honeysuckle, lemon lime blossom, maybe a little bit of jasmine. It's so pretty, that combination of perfect stone fruit, peaches especially, and a florality that's lovely. And the next slide. By the way, I find this wine irresistibly delicious. So not only did I take another sip, I swallowed it. So moving on. We get to have fun, don't we, Li Meng? I mean, why not? Great wine, cheers, one up. Not much of a vegetative expression, I would say, in terms of vegetable or herbal, a little bit of ginger, and then maybe some sorrel or verbena. Both of those have, citrus tones to them. There's the ginger powder again, possibly a little bit of honey too, but it's a back note. But, once your brain gets the stone fruit and the citrus out of the way, the honey kicks in. It's like an illusion of sweetness, which we're going to talk about actual sweetness momentarily on the structure. I really don't get any organic earth on this, but I get a definitive, clear, though not, compelling rocky minerality to this wine. And it's coming across slate-like to me. Don't feel like you have to define it, but there's definitely a sense of inorganic earth. Perceived winemaking choices, botrytis harvest. I am not going to define that. I'm going to let one of my colleagues maybe touch on that, but I will tell you, pivoting to the structure, that this is as much of a punchline in this wine and in deducing it as anything aromatic or flavor wise. So residual sugar off dry, what does that mean? It means that especially mid palate, we perceive actually unfermented grape sugar, right? Acidity, high. It is wonderful because it's bracing and it pulls the wine because the wine is very long indeed. But the acidity doesn't shut the flavor down. You're tasting through it happily. Alcohol, medium to medium minus. I don't perceive alcohol, which means it's perfectly balanced and on the low side. The word does not occur to me. I actually have to look for it. Texture, lean and tart, but again, with a little bit of RS, there it is. But the finish, it's like the RS fleshes out mid palate and then it finishes on an upswing of lean, mouthwatering acidity. Finish long, plus, plus, plus. Complexity, medium to medium plus, but I'm thinking, boy, would this week be neat with a little bit of bottle age too. It's one of those white wines where that occurs to you. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at what our options are. Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Sauvignon Blanc, blend, other. And please, if you think it's other, don't be shy, speak up because, you're vocalizing what other people may be thinking. Do you want to say anything else about the poll, Li Meng? How long do we
Yeah,
keep that for?
absolutely. Yeah, so this, even if you know what it is, help us understand what you thought it was before you know the answer, because that will kind of articulate. If you are confused, what is the difference between Riesling and Gewürztraminer, Madeline, for instance, that I should be looking for? And we also see an other here is in Shannon. I think that's really interesting coming.
Actually, as interesting as the other two options. Thank you, Li Meng. And I mean, everyone, use your common sense. We're giving you three options of highly aromatic white grape varieties. So we're not messing around here. So Riesling and add Chenin in there in the other category. Let's take Gewürztraminer first. Certainly, it's got a florality, but its florality is compelling to the point of being, what's the hackneyed phrase? Old lady perfume on a bad day, and it's much pushier than the florality on this wine. And I don't mean to be, giving it away, but I'm telling the truth as I see these options. Sauvignon Blanc blend, you're going to be looking definitely for the citrus expression. And we certainly found citrus on this wine, but then you ask yourself, what other citrus elements do I commonly expect in Sauvignon Blanc? Perhaps grapefruit? Chenin Blanc, very interesting option. Because you get florality, you get peach apricot. What other elements of inorganic earth, particularly from the old world, might you get in Chenin that you wouldn't get in Riesling? Just a thought. And then we have the country options.
And how about Muscat as an option? It's so floral. Is it
actually
does it kind of throw you that way?
That's a great, thank you for bringing that up because there's, 4 grape varieties that use flowers big time in their aromas, and Muscat is absolutely one of them. But I think it's a little bit more, frankly, of a one-note wonder, and it tends not to have the complexity that this wine is displaying. I mean, I'm not dogging a grape variety. I'm simply saying how it's generally expressed in wine, and it often also has a little bit of RS, but texturally and structurally, the acidity is going to be, for the most part, perceivably less than on Riesling or Chenin. Gewürztraminer, moderate acidity levels and can be actually verging on deficient depending on where it's grown.
All right, I'm going to share the results so everyone can see it. Overwhelmingly, Riesling versus Gewürztraminer. No one thought that it was Sauvignon Blanc. And then we talked about some of the other. And then we also have here Germany taking 57%, and some France, and some Australia, and even some in Washington. So I think most of the folks were in the old world versus new world. Before we give the answer away, do you want to make a comment about old versus new, what you're looking for?
Well, you know what, and let's just take this again, common sense wise. If it's Riesling, and if we're putting, or even Gewürztraminer, and we're putting it in France, we're talking about Alsace for all practical purposes, warmer growing region. So you consider that when you are assessing acidity and alcohol levels. Again, structure, hugely important, common sense. New World Australia, particularly with Riesling, can definitely fake you out in thinking it's the old world. To be honest with you, I haven't tasted enough Washington State Riesling, especially, to be able to peg it. Maybe one of my colleagues would. I find it interesting that we didn't elect to put Austria in there, which kind of makes sense, especially when you consider the residual sugar level. But I take my hat off to the people who are standing firm on Gewürz and Chenin, because those are clear options.
Yeah.
I want to comment, and as we reveal, that the delicacy of this wine and the lifted, refreshing nature of it is really special and speaks to its growing region. And where is that as we put our seatbelt on?
Carmen
All right,
San Diego.
let's take a look. And
Here
I have to thank Andrea for always building out these beautiful slides and the Google
Yes.
Earth. I love this particular Google Earth, Madeline. I really, I
Oh.
think looking at the picture really helps understand why this wine tastes the way it does.
The way it does. There's the river, the Saar, Forstmeister, Gelt, Zilliken. I'm horrific at German pronunciation. You can shorthand it Zilliken. Look at the grade of those slopes. And I mean, it tells the whole story. And also, were we able to, telescope in, we'd see slate-covered vineyards, which is no small factor as they retain heat and radiate them into the vines. When you're at, in this particular growing region, that makes it possible to get grapes right here. Wonderful, wonderful Google map. Thank you. And then here we are, just slightly more traditional, and you'll see there we are in the Mosel, but we're south of the middle Mosel, and here it is. So, there's Barrencastle, Velen, Peaceport, and then here we go to the Ruwer, one tributary, and then here's the Saar, and there is the township where these guys are based, Saarburg. So did we look at the label yet? Here it is, Zilliken, 2019, Young, Saarburg, Riesling, Cabernet. Early harvest, so yes, indeed, there is residual sugar, and yes, indeed, the alcohol is modest, and I think it's around 8.5, 9. And
yeah, it's 8.5.
8.5.
This is definitely Lake Tahoe by the beach drinking wine.
Anywhere. Even if it's cold, you can
Yeah.
easily forget that this has an alcohol content, which makes it part of its spectacular charm. Just a couple things about Zilliken. I think we have some nice pictures to show people. This is an area of the Mosel that's very unique because the climate here is marginal, and it provides even higher acidity levels in the wines. And the slate soils are less uniform, again, which can add to heightened acidity levels, something that the Saar is known for. I think this is a really perfect expression of Mosel Cabernet. To me, you can memorize this wine. Can we go to the next slide? I think we have some, here are Dorothy and Hanno Zilliken. We're going to see their cellars momentarily, which Tim has visited and tells me the humidity is like 100%, right? And they don't have to top off their foudre as a result, which is very cool indeed. They are widely lauded for the perfect quality of their Rieslings at all levels. And Tim was, mini bragging about some older Zilliken Auslese that he's got, because just to remind us, these things age with more enthusiasm and success than many, many red wines do.
Madeline, sorry, just two things that are coming up in chat. One person said from Ben that it is lower alcohol than expected. Would you think that this is 8.5 is normal sort of alcohol for Cabernet Riesling?
I think so. Tim, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, actually, the numbers on alcohol across the board in Germany have gone up in the last 25, 30
Right.
years. Cabinet Riesling from the Mosel Saarbrücker used to be 7% when I was studying way back when. And so it's crept up a point or a point and a half.
Mm.
And that's just climate change. The acid, somebody made a comment, thought the acid was a little lower than expected. I would just say, take a sip, hold it in your mouth for about 5 to 10 seconds and notice that your enamel is not liking it or you for doing that.
And
The
to
enamel-
your point, Tim, too, it really will be heightened or lessened depending on how cold the wine is and also
Yeah, true.
how long it's been open. But that RS can be a great fake out in terms of padding the acidity, which is one of the reasons it works so nicely. Oh, thank you.
Oh,
Dan.
you knew it's coming. This is a great
Yeah.
question.
I knew it
You want me
was
to take
coming.
that?
So let me
Maddie?
just hold on one second. Let me just tell everyone what the question is, because this was not posed to everyone. So we have a question here from Jeff that was only sent to the panelists. So again, a reminder, please send your questions either in the Q&A or do it in the chat to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, we're the only ones who get the benefit of seeing your lovely question. But Jeff, we were waiting for this question, so thank you for it. The question is, doesn't Mosel Riesling usually have a petrol aroma? Who's going to take this one?
Tim's taking it because I asked Tim about it before we got
Yeah.
on.
All right, so Jeff, that's a great question. And to answer it, not always. And especially with this particular producer who I know well. I've been on the property a couple of times and I have quite a few bottles in my cellar, especially at the lower end of Prädikats like Cabinet and Spätlese, because the wine is made in such a cold cellar and it's reductive, meaning fermentations take forever. The wines of this producer rarely show TDN when they're young. That's been my experience. And also Mosel generally, because it's a cooler climate, the wines can show TDN when they're young, but generally not. Once you get into a warmer place, and Madeline mentioned Austria and Alsace, the answer is yes, because when you have a shorter, hotter growing cycle, you have more incidence of TDN when the wines are young.
Australia, right? And
Yeah, absolutely.
especially
Good
when
point.
they're young.
Yeah.
No, and
Yeah.
it's funny that it's so good that you asked this because when we got on, I said to Tim, I was looking for it, the petrol, can't find it. He says, it's low. And this is why I think it's low.
Yeah.
I have to tell you guys, just qualitatively, you're tasting from a producer that is 100% estate grown, right? And also check out their website. It's really neat. We don't commonly do this, but their recommendation on food with this wine is so bang on the money. Goat cheese, tart, right? Baked in brick pastry with mango chili sweetness, tropical heat chutney. How cool is that?
All right, last question, and we have to move on from this to keep everything on par. Here's a great question from Sasha. Is there a little bit of phenolic showing on the palate? I'm getting a slight scratching on my tongue. Love the question. Thank you, Sasha.
Boy, it tastes, I get the acidity very clearly on the sides of my tongue, but my tongue is smooth. The texture hasn't really been raised or affected. Gentlemen, how about you?
Can I just say that, Sasha, that's a great question. And, I don't think we'll even have to answer it by the time we taste all three white wines.
What do you mean by that?
You mean
I'm just
because the
saying that
phenolics will
one of
go
the other
up?
two wines may show considerable phenolic
Right.
thickness.
We're not saying you're wrong. We're just saying that at the moment, if it's got it, it's subtle.
Yeah.
Great. All right, let's go to wine number 2.
Yeah, just as my quick answer as we move into that one. When phenolic to me is sort of a combination of bitterness. Usually get it from the skins there, and that is going to give you sort of a slight more of a roughness or a dryness nature, but also a bitterness of flavor, which I don't think you're getting here. Old world wines will exhibit sort of a grit or sort of a chalkiness of texture, which may be where you're can be a little bit of slight confusion. So not a bad call at all, and a great discussion point. Again, Sasha, thank you for bringing it up. Wine number 2 is something a little bit different here. It's also bright. It's definitely same in that straw vein we talked about there, although a little bit more or depth to it. And it has green highlights for sure. As Madeline said earlier, green is a bird dog for either cool climate or for early ripening or young wine or some combination of all three. In the nose palate of this, it is very strong on the citrus vein as well too. Whatever you call it, whether it's lemons, whether it's limes, whether it's sharp, tart, underripe mandarins, whatever, it is definitely there and zesty and springy and electric. It is fresh and is ripe and is probably more flesh to me than it is anything else. Tree fruit definitely in that sort of harder bite the apple, beat your mouth up malic acid vein sort of thing, and soft stone fruit. But what also gets me here is the tropicality of the wine, picking up specifically tamarind, which is sort of the somebody explained it once to me as it's Mother Nature's Sour Patch Kids lemon candy. So I thought that was a very good call. If you ever wondered what tamarind looks like, it looks like a peanut, but it tastes like a Sour Patch Kids yellow candy. Mother Nature's version. And pineapple, definitely sort of on that green, slightly underripe pineapple character, which can be an interesting element to perhaps provenance if we think about that later, both on the ripe side and on the underripe side, particularly for the pineapple. A little bit of elderflower, again, that sort of bright freshness thing, a little bit of citrus blossoms. And as we move forward, what I'm getting here is, there's elements of some other stuff, not a lot of green, maybe a little bit of sort of that caper berry thing. Again, think about, capers are usually done in sort of a salty, briny thing. Ditto olives can have that. There's definitely a sort of so I'll come to it in a minute, sort of like a saline brininess to this wine, which is again, perhaps implicit to where it's from. The other vegetables not speaking to me too much today. A little bit of that sort of sesame candy, nougat, halava character, for those of you familiar with that lovely candy. But what really draws me here is that minerality, is that rock, is that salinity, is that sort of seashell thing. For those of you who have ever been so upset that you burst into crying and the tears went down your face and you swallowed them, I get that in this wine a little bit too. That sort of very strong salient thing. The oak is definitely there. I pick it up in texture. I pick it up very slightly in punctuation, and there is a little kiss of new, but it's probably older and it's probably larger. And definitely some lees contact here. I get that for texture. I'm not picking up so many of the ML clues, either the buttery, the popcornness, or whatever, but I am picking up texture, which could also be an ML thing as you soften your acids out there. As far as the acid goes in the palate, it's a dry wine, of course, and it's defined, I think, by this sort of rapier, electrical, razor blade-like acidity to it. I mean, that's what this wine is all about. This is not, by the way, sit on your deck, stare at the clouds, yak with your friends, and just chat wine. This is a wine of gravitas. It demands food. It demands maybe some time in your cellar as well too, but it screams of place. It screams of what it is. So as to the poll, what do we have choice-wise here? We've got a couple of elements. We've got our friend Chardonnay. We've got Viognier as either a standalone or a blend. Again, Viognier is often blended with other grapes. Pinot Gris / Grigio, and of course, our good friend Other. Don't feel shy and bashful about voicing another opinion. And then associated places. I'd like you to think back to what Viognier is all about. For those of you who were with us a month or so ago, when we did that fabulous Drew Viognier from my bromance crush, Jason Drew, up in Mendocino County. Remember the florality, remember the very strong orchard fruit nature of it. We've had our share of Pinot Grigios before, etc. And then placements of other spots. Limang, anything? You're muted, Limang.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, there's always construction somewhere in Tahoe. There's construction in the back, so I mute myself. But I wanted to remind everyone, if you're tasting alone or you're tasting before the panelists come on, and you want to kind of give yourself a little bit of a clue, you can go to Quick Picks or go to the full workout and click on the hints that we have for grape variety and for region. It might help you narrow down. You'll see some of the options that we have here. We make it even harder when you come to the webinar because we are explaining it to you. But this will at least narrow it down. You're not trying to pick which white wine it is from a list of 17. Evan, so as you're tasting this wine and it's got all these characteristics, how would you say, and talk a little bit as we give people like 30 seconds here, talk about what really drew you to show this wine in this kit.
Well, I'm always a wonderful supporter of purity of expression, of absolute defined, chiseled expression. And I think that this wine, I could say, especially when we, divulge what it is, may be polarizing for some people, depending on your experience and all that. But if you're either a fan of this genre of wine, or B, open-minded to learning about it, this is a absolute spot-on example of what it is and what it should be vis-a-vis that. And I think that's usually what I'm looking for. I'm trying not to pick wines that stunt double from something else. You don't want to have I don't know, a Chenin Blanc that tastes like a California Chardonnay. You want wines that are not trying to dupe people, because anybody can make any grape into anything they want it to taste like through intervention. And I like wines that speak to what they are.
All right. All right. Thank you, Evan. We're going to close the poll now. I'm going to share the results, and you'll see that we have some contenders. And I think, Evan, you'll have to help explain this. We've got 48% of folks here thinking that it's Chardonnay. But then we also have 17% thinking that it's Viognier. And then you've got the Pinot Grigio. So number 1, Chard, number 2, Pinot Grigio, and number 3, Viognier. And for somebody who picked other, let us know what you thought other was so that we can help you out here. And then in terms of old versus new world, I think that folks are mostly in the new world. You've got about 61% in the new world, 40% in the old world. So Evan, do you want to review, or you want to talk a little bit about these?
No, we could talk about it quickly, and then we'll go into Google Earth mode. Viognier, once again, I don't think this wine is expressive enough. If you were to get Viognier that was not as perfumed as this, it would be extremely underripe, and it would be, frankly, unpleasant to drink. If you think the acid on it is high now, try drinking, 11%, 12% Viognier, and watch your cheeks cave in. Pinot Grigio, from Italy, generally with a couple of notable exceptions, doesn't have this much expression. It tends to have this level of acid, but it doesn't have as quote unquote much going on, certainly in the realm of the tropicality of fruit and some of those other nature. Pinot Gris could be this way if you were in Alsace or perhaps Oregon, but the acid levels would not be as bracing as this, and it probably wouldn't, they might be more generous actually in terms of texture too. As far as the world goes, I can see very well where this wine might be a little confusing. You do have some elements of old world, particularly minerality, salinity, but you also have a purity of fruit and brightness that you would get there. The Albarino call from the net that she's just putting up, let me address that before we pop into the land of Google Earth. Not a bad one, in the sense that you do get sort of tropical fruits and some stone fruits. You do get super bright acids in cooler places, particularly the Portugal version, more of Alvarinho rather than the Albarino. Albarinos by nature tend to be, one, more stone fruit, and B, more textured than this one would be.
Mm-hmm. And on the aromas, wouldn't it be quite different too?
Well, yes, you probably have less citric, but again, depends on where you are. Alvarinho from Portugal, that you oftentimes see as a sort of single variety Vinho Verde, can be very citric as well too, but probably wouldn't show you as much tropicality. Those that would be more tropical probably wouldn't show you as much citrus. So this has that odd combination that perhaps pulls it from the Albarino camp.
I'm going to jump in here because, Viognier too does have the thumbprint of a distinct floral fragrance that is to be considered, as does Albarino.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go to Google Earth and see where we're going here. So clearly we're going into the New World, to USA, and you can see there the landscape is very different from that first winery. And this is actually, you're not seeing it right here, but when we were going into the coast, and Lompoc is, I don't know what the distance is from the ocean, but it's pretty close on the central coast.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that where we are here, sort of down in the Santa Rita, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara area, they do have these sort of two perpendicular openings to the water. So you get a lot of cool air pulled in, which is going to really contribute to that sort of acidity level that that you see there. And that's true of all the areas, particularly Santa Rita. What's interesting and what's sort of counterintuitive is here you are further south in California than just about anywhere, yet this is amongst the very last fruit to be picked in the entire state. So it doesn't really pass that intuition thing. But again, if you do get these bright acid levels, and this is, by the way, as true of their Pinot Noir as it is of their Chardonnay, as it would be of some of the Syrah in the cooler areas. And again, you can see Santa Rita and Santa Maria there, particularly, and Lompoc are closer west, are closer to the water than, say, Happy Canyon, which is on the far east area and actually is great territory for, believe it or not, Cabernet Sauvignon. So really, you can't just sort of paint a brush over everything. You need to think about it there. But if you see those sort of inlet areas pulling through from the water and all the way through, you do get this transversal character that you get that you don't get anywhere else.
Evan, this is a great question. Just dovetail off of what you just said. How would you distinguish between Santa Barbara and Sonoma Coast from Jane?
For me, you definitely get more of the sea than you get on the, when you get further north, you definitely get cool climate and all of that. But to me, I always associate these other areas. In the Pinots, you get more of a seaweed or kelp character. In the Chardonnays, you get more salinity and seashell character. You get less of that further north, although you do get a brightness of expression. They're more herbal for the Pinots and more lemony and less seashell-y for that. So this wine is from a terrific winemaker, Justin Willett, at his winery Tyler, which he started up in 2005. He had been in other places before. This is a labor of love for him. And he, in fact, if you go to his website, the front page says Wines of the Sea. And he really makes an effort to bring that element of his wine out. To that. And it shows well. If you ever had wines from, I don't know, Melville would be another great example where you find that sort of salinity in their Chardonnays. And again, that sort of kelpy character in their Pinot Noirs. It's a combination of vineyards. As you can see, it's a county appellation. So it's not specific to Santa Maria or Santa Rita or whatever. But it's for some great choice vineyards in Sanford and Benedict and Bien Nacido and Rinconda and Dierberg and all that, assemblage together, 100% native yeast, no malolactic fermentation, but 11 months, and no batonnage, but extended time on the lees. So what you're picking up there in terms of, I mentioned sort of a nougaty, a halava character there, that is an autolytic breakdown, as those yeast cells break down and they sort of, pardon my French, spew their guts a little bit into the wine. That's when you pick up some of these complexity things that I often, like I said, pick up as sort of nougat or nougatine in there. It is a night picked on top of that. And the oak is only 10% new. The rest of it's older, larger, and yeah.
Yeah, we have a great picture here
That's the fabulous Justin Willett, first of all. And that's him.
Yeah, doing with the headlamps, ready for the night pick, which I absolutely love.
Yeah. And he, by the way, makes killer Pinot too. So if his style and the sort of austerity of it and the singularity of it speaks to you, I would encourage you to explore his Pinots. And also, he does make single vineyard wines. This is just a county wine, but he makes some really good single vineyard wines too.
Great.
And there's some shots.
Awesome. We're having this comment about salinity that I started on chat, and I just wanted to say, Evan, I thought that you made a wonderful, you always make good selections, but this one really helps people identify what salinity is in wines, and that was really helpful for that example.
And not only do you sort of taste it, and obviously this is not like sucking down brine, it's not that level of salt. But it is there. You also pick it up texturally as well, too, which is why for people that got confused in France earlier or the old world, you oftentimes get that same sort of chalky, minerally pull on your tongue and on the sides of your mouth a little bit. Just a slight pull there, which is, again, something I associate with that sort of mineral saline type character.
Last question before we move on. Tony has a great question here. Thank you, Tony. And it's great to see you on here. He says, I have not had this much minerality from Santa Barbara County wines. Is this atypical?
No, I think it really depends on who you're talking to. I think that those people in Santa Rita, by virtue of, if you can recall the map, the proximity, they tend to pick up more of it and tend to accentuate that when they have it. The further east, the further, the further away that that you get, it's going to still be there. Again, those transverse valleys and openings will definitely get it, but you're not going to bring it out as much. And there are some people that love the acid but don't like that. So they work in winemaking and intentionally to kind of play it down. So it really is, it's very much interpretive and stylistically important. Justin is a big advocate of it. Like I said, Chad Melville is another one I know happens to be a fan of that style too.
I'm going to throw this out there as we move on to the next wine. I'm just curious because I hear a lot from our folks or people in general that they don't love Chardonnay. I wonder if people liked this Chardonnay from California and if you were surprised by the Chardonnay. So as we move on to the next wine, if you have a thought there, please do let us know in chat.
Arguably
Can
an
I
acquired
say?
taste
Oh, yes,
for
please,
some.
go for
Go
it.
ahead, Madeline.
One thing, because what's an interesting fingerprint, and like all fingerprints, it's not foolproof, but when you're in this area, when you're in Santa Barbara, what you get is this combination, particularly when you're in vineyards close to the coast, of bracing acidity, strong minerality, but you also get ripe fruit. So it's this neat juxtaposition. Evan mentioned pineapple earlier. It's not expressing itself big time in this wine at this moment, but for those of you that are playing with trying to identify New World Chardonnays, hold that thought. The tropical fruit expression, especially aromatically, will often be more forward than in this wine.
Great. All right. Tim, you're next up, wine number 3.
Okay. Hello again, everybody. Wine number 3, and now for something completely different, as they say on TV. First thing, to quick look at the glass is that we got much deeper color here than wines 1 and 2. And that can mean any number of different things. It could mean age, could mean botrytis fruit, could mean extended skin contact, could mean oak. And we will endeavor to discover which one of those is true, if not more. Okay, in terms of just looking at the grid of the site, it is clear. It's definitely day bright, not as bright as the previous 2 wines. More color in the glass gets you less reflected light. And then the color is definitely yellow, not straw. Secondary colors, I've got a little bit of silver in mine, and that's about it. And there are no bubbles. Excellent. Then, nose and palate, again, a very different wine. In terms of citrus, I'm going both sweet and tart here. So I've got some regular lemon to me that's especially pronounced on the palate, but also Meyer lemon, a sweeter lemon, and maybe a little bit of mandarin. I wouldn't quite go as ripe as orange. For me, they're fresh and ripe. Not sure about the jammy baked part, although the jammy baked part is going to apply to the tree fruit in just a second. So definitely more peel and zest than anything. All right, so now going into the apple pear camp, and to me, more riper than tart. So I would say more red and yellow apple, maybe even golden apple, and then a riper Bosque pear. And definitely fresh and ripe, and a little bit of baked quality to the apple to me. Some stone fruit, more yellow than white. White connotating here, less ripeness. And again, fresh and ripe. Some tropical fruit. I don't find as much here. A little bit of pineapple for me, and that's about it. But again, fresh and ripe. Floral, yes, white flowers. I like citrus blossom, and I like honeysuckle, and definitely fresh. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so not to me vegetal type things here. White mushrooms, yes. A little bit of ginger root, yes. Onions, no, not for me. Neither corn. I like verbena and chamomile, especially a chamomile, which for me personally is a marker for this particular grape, no matter where it's grown. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to it. Not too much organic earth, but to me, a profound amount of mineral and rocky and stoniness to it. No animals were in sight when this wine was made. Yes, there is some oak aging. It's mixed. There is some definitely a little touch on the palate of vanilla, slight spices, and the texture of smaller barrels. But notice it's really in the background. It's a lesser player and not out in front. So yes, so that will give you some oxidative type qualities. To me, the almond marzipan really nails it. Maybe some pistachio. Chemical compounds, no. Winemaking choices, to me, there's some lees contact here. And besides the oak usage, that's about it. In terms of the structure, very important, residual sugar, it's fermented dry. The acid medium plus, to me, medium plus plus, a little higher, not high, but close. The alcohol is medium plus. In fact, compared to wines 1 and 2, it's pretty generous with the alcohol. Okay, phenols, I'm going to disagree here. I think there's low phenolics. If I hold the mouth of my wine for like 5 seconds at least, there's some astringency, some bitterness, and that to me is the grape. The texture is round and smooth, but it finishes with some acidity. And the finish to me today is long, and complexity is medium plus. Okay, our instructive work is finished, and now the deductive work begins.
Great. So we've got the 3 options and other: Chenin, Blanc, Riesling, and Chardonnay here. And for those of you, lest you think that we would not put 2 Chardonnays in a row, we have done that before. So I won't give it away here. And then what region? You've got Old World, Germany and France, and then New World, South Africa and California. And I want to just a shout out to Madeline for thank you for being my technical consultant today, and showing Mark how one would find the quick picks. I will also, at the end of the 6 wines, take you guys on a little tour so that you can really find the hints, because I think that will
Can I have a little certificate that says technical consultant?
New business card. New business card.
Sure, Madeline. But Tim, I love that you disagreed with our grid. And I think a year ago I would have been like, you're disagreeing. But I want everybody to know that the process that Evan and I have to go through when I'm moderating our tasting panel, and we've got 3 master sommeliers, and we're trying to fill out this grid. It's a lot of times very difficult to land, and a lot of times it's subjective. Yep. So Evan, maybe a comment from you about why there would be disagreements and how wines do taste different in evolution.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to remember that wines taste different on different days. And I'm not making joke of like the biodynamic calendar and fruit days versus earth days, but we taste different on different days. Wines change in the bottle and express different elements on different days. So when we write a tasting note, and there is going to be disagreement, 2 things. Number 1, we try and be generous rather than it tastes like this, and then, if you feel like you didn't get that there. So we will throw out more generally that we feel rides on the periphery of what a wine is about rather than less. And then once again, realize that a day that we might taste, you may not find something that you pulled out tomorrow that you did before the day before. You might find something different. So it's a little bit like nailing Jell-O to a wall. That is to say, trying to get a tasting note absolutely perfect. And they're not evergreen. They change as the wine change. They change as you change. So if you find yourself disagreeing with something that we said or finding something different that was there, that's okay. As long as you're not going blackberry, we're generally cool in this particular case of wine. So points well taken, and points given to artistic differences within the realm of white fruit, white wines.
And I have to just point out, Evan, a comment here from Jane. What a relief. This was my first time going through the grid and was depressed. Never be depressed reading our grids, because I, again, we don't take ourselves so seriously, and we don't say, oh my God, you didn't get that you must be wrong. It's really important to know that even if you don't get it, we do get directional. But then on the other hand, I'm somebody who really likes to have results, answers. And it's very disorienting to taste something blind and not have some direction on answers. So use our grids directionally. If you find it too, cheer. If you don't find it, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. And at the end of the day, it's your palate, your experiences that count for a lot more. I grew up in Asia. I can taste tropical fruit in a whole different way that I can't maybe taste some of the more American-based fruits.
So you got the tamarind in the last wine, I bet, then. Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
At least there's no durian,
fruit.
Right?
Yeah, all right, so I I am going to, and I love what Ben say. And if you have an impatient friend, just know that, you know, you can do the full workout and your friend can do the quick picks workout. So Tim, I'm going to end the polling and share the results
Okay.
here. And
Yep.
you can see that, Tim, most of our folks here are getting Chenin. Some
Yep.
did get Chardonnay and very few on Riesling, but really majority were on Chenin. And then we also have, probably by virtue of people knowing their knowledge of where Chenin is coming from, between France and South Africa. So I think that you'll need to explain which way we're going here.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, if I can just a side note, I'm reading some notes about people's challenges with tasting. You know, as your attorney, I would just say this. There are three things to key on as you go through your journey of becoming a professional taster, and they will not fail you. If you key on fruit, it will fail you, okay? If you key on single markers almost all the time, at some point they will fail you. What will keep you on the tried and true is impact compounds, and I'll go over those for all three of those grapes in just a second, and also structure, okay? And with that, let's just say, you know, why is this not Riesling? Well, the alcohol here is higher than the first two wines by far. It's 13 something, close to 14%. If you have that much alcohol and ripeness in Riesling, it's from a warm place, and there will be TDM, probably pretty strongly. Why is it not Chardonnay? Because if there's going to be this kind of ripeness, you would have a strong imprint of malolactic and least contact and oak. All right, so that does get you back to Chenin Blanc. And then it's profoundly mineral, but to me, it doesn't speak of France. It really doesn't. By the way, that marker I said for me as a tell is chamomile. I get that in practically any Chenin Blanc, and that's just me, okay? And then I'm glad everybody went to South Africa, or many of you did, because they're making profound Chenin Blancs there. I mean, there are Chenin Blanc vineyards well over a century old, and to me, it's really exciting to see this. Before we started the session, you know, the four of us were talking about this amazing South African Chenin Blanc seminar that was at the last BevCon in September 2019. It was incredible to taste the wines, okay? And I think that's all yak I need to say at the moment.
All right,
Li-Ming,
great.
did I miss anything?
Let's get to the place.
Okay, yes.
And so we are going down to South Africa.
Yay.
We don't often get wines from this part of the world. They're not, you know, depending on where you are in the United States, they're not as well imported, I think, as they deserve. Wouldn't you say, Tim?
Yes. And this is from Swartland, which is about 100 miles inward from the coast, and the temperature differences and the elevation, it's pretty extreme. So the Swartland, I just love this factoid, everybody. It translates from the black land, and it takes its name from the dark color at a certain time of year because there's a bush called the Rhenish Sturbos, which translates as the rhino bush. And any place that's got trees called rhino bushes is cool in my book. That's all I got to tell you. All right, so you can see, you know, Swartland where it is. And it's really at a confluence of about 4 different mountain ranges. These vineyards, average age is 40 years. And, you know, Evan said something before we got into the session, and he's absolutely right. He said, you know, Chenin Blanc doesn't start to show its stuff until the vines get old. Because, you know, if you think about where most of the Chenin Blanc in California that's quality comes from, it comes from Clarksburg in the Delta near Sacramento. And I know that place because that's where I used to go houseboating. So wine, houseboating, yeah, maybe not so much. So it's kind of like the Hello Kitty of Chenin Blanc compared to this stuff, right? And what else about it? Again, these are dry farm vineyards. Some of them are almost 80 years old. You know, this is, again, Vincent Carême and his wife Tanya. He is French. He was actually born in Vouvray. He has a domain in Vouvray that he has run since 1999. Previous to that, though, he worked for Crushes in South Africa and fell in love with the place. So I don't know, you know, when he finishes up after the holidays, he heads south thousands of miles and then works another crush in Swartland. It's pretty remarkable stuff. And that is Vincent and Tanya, who's South African. And so this particular wine, again, made from several different vineyard sources, is native ferment. in a mix of 40% stainless steel, 40% large cooperage, but again, 20% in second year French barriques, Burgundy barrels. And you can really tell. Yeah, look at those vines. That's pretty remarkable.
I love
I
the
got to
picture
tell
of
you,
that. Yeah.
I think that this, I'm stunned that so many of you got Chenin from South Africa. You know, bravo to you.
That's good.
And if you didn't, no worries. This is a complex white wine, but you know how Tim said that his marker, his bell ringer is chamomile? That's a personal marker. So for you,
Yeah.
it may be different, but you develop, it's almost like a little flag that comes up and goes, hi, honey. You know, when I put my nose in Chenin, I usually, if it's French Chenin, I usually get wet wool, and nobody watches cashmere sweaters anymore or has cashmere sweaters anymore. So you may not know what that smells like. So you've got classic markers, and then you've got personal markers that when you're teaching yourself to recognize can be very useful indeed. So if chamomile means nothing to you, your personal marker for
Don't worry
Chenin
about
may be something else.
Yeah.
Hay actually resonates with me.
Yeah,
Also.
and Maddie, you make a good point because sulfur is a grape in terms of winemaking. It just absorbs sulfur, and to get to enough free sulfur for it to be actually effective as a preservative, sulfur just absorbs it. And so more often than not, you know, Vouvray, Savennières, things like that, they have that wet wool, which is some kind of sulfur compound and detectable SO2 in the nose. This wine for me, not so much at all. Yeah.
I also like Tim's comment a lot. You have 3 white wines, and I hope you have it in 3 different glasses. I'm in an Airbnb, so I could only find 1 semi-decent glass today. But what I meant,
BYOG.
right? What I almost brought my own crystal glasses, and I thought the rest of the family would just think that I'm completely gone insane. But I want to emphasize that when you're doing a comparative tasting like ours, it's really helpful to have all 3 white wines all poured out, because what Tim is talking about on the phenols, you know, that bitter bite and all that, if you go back to wine number 1, you're not going to taste it quite as much. Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate that. All right. We're now going on to wine number 4, Tim.
Okay. All right, so everybody's taking wine number 4 in hand, and you know, as you tilt your glass forward against a white background, obviously to note this is a lighter pigmented, thinner skinned grape. Important, especially compared to say glass 6, which is quite different. All right, you can actually read through it, so it's definitely clear. It is a medium ruby red color with a lighter pink rim, although there's a tiny bit of, dare I say it, Li Meng, dare, salmon.
Tim and I fought over whether this color was going in the grid. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Enough of that. And then on the nose and palate, it's dominated by red fruit. And you know, that's connecting the dots because you have a wine with this lighter color and it's red. Guess what? Red fruit is going to dominate the wine. And vice versa. If it's really deep in color, black fruit is going to dominate the wine because you're talking about ripeness levels and climate, warm climate, on and on and on. Okay. So I like sour cherry, strawberry, pomegranate, red plum. Those all work. Those are fresh, ripe, and I would add tart. No blue fruit. And black fruit, for me, a slight touch of black cherry, but really not too much at all. And it would be fresh too. I do agree with the orange and orange peel that is dried. And that's really a great call here. Rose and is a wonderful call too. And that's also fresh and dried, rose petal. Okay. Next slide, please. You know, once you're past the fruit and flowers, there's quite a bit of non-fruit savory type things going on here. No green vegetative type things, but definitely fennel and anise are both a really good call. I love rhubarb, little bit of kola nut, if anything, that's from the oak. Tea leaf and bergamot, yes, quite a bit. A tiny bit of mint too, not eucalyptus. And then a strong presence of laurel and bay leaf to me. So this is really interesting. So we've got red fruit dominated wine that is herbal, but not, we must emphasize, vegetal. Organic earth, a touch of soil to me, a touch of mineral and rock, but to me, not pronounced. No animals inside once again, that's always a good thing. Oak aging, yes, and it's mixed. I think here it is smaller barrels because there is toast, smoke, coffee, tea, but it's in the background. It's not front and center. So we've got used oak here, but you have all those elements happening. And then a touch of hazelnut oxidation. I would say yes to partial whole cluster fermentation. And if you've got partial whole cluster, you've got stems holding those clusters together. So there is a little green stemmy type quality, especially on the mid palate. Okay, the wine is fermented dry. The acid's medium plus. I would say the alcohol is medium. And the tannin for me is medium, not medium plus. And it finishes lean and tart, okay? So here again, I think you've got a lighter pigmented grape and you've got a cooler climate. And the finish is medium plus, and complexity, I would say medium plus to high, a lot of things going on. And I think a delightful wine, very deceptive in terms of its lighter color and then red fruit profile, but so many things secondarily going on. Delightful wine. Okay.
All right, we're gonna look at our options, and I have to say, I love this wine. So which grape variety is it? Pinot Noir, Gamay, Sangiovese, and then what region do you see this coming from? And sometimes I think, Tim, one of the hints that you've given me before is it's easier to sort of figure out where you think in the world it's from before deciding on the variety.
Yeah, good call. So in other words, going old world, new world first, what drives the bus, you know, fruit and other things versus earth and mineral. So yeah, and then trying to figure out the grape.
Great. So
Yeah.
I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds so that we can do this really quickly. Now you should be veterans by wine number 4. Don't hesitate. Just hit the dial, give us your answer. And again, it's anonymous, so would love to see everybody voting. And Tim, you know, what hint would you give people as they sort of power through this in like the last 10 seconds here?
Okay. Well, I would just say that, you know, you think about especially the color, the lighter color. And if I go to Gamay, I'm expecting this to be Beaujolais Village, in which case, where's the carbonic maceration? It's not there. And then if this is Sangiovese at this light color, it's going to be a simple Chianti. And if that's the case, where's the acidity? Where's the grape tannin? You know, both of those are missing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Tony brings up a really good point. Our hints here are a little bit different from the hints on our website because here we get the benefit of putting other and explain to you things. On the website, we actually put things that are easier for you to eliminate. So like Malbec was given as an option because Malbecs are usually really dark and it's an easy throwaway answer. It's like kind of when you're taking the SATs and they tell you which one is it obviously not going to be. And so we're trying to give you some options that are, if we have a very, very rich Chardonnay, we try to give you Pinot Grigio as one of the 4 answers online so that it'll help you kick it out. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And we're going to share the results. Here we go. So, Tim, I think you have your work cut out. We've got 52% of the folks going Pinot Noir, but it's kind of split down the middle between Gamay and Sangiovese. So it might help to kind of explain why it's one, and giving it away a little bit, I think, is helpful in this case. And then, of course, in terms of old world versus new world, I think people are showing a little bit of being lost. This is not an easy selection, I think, here, because you're at 50% old world and 50% new world. And even within that, France and Italy kind of got a mix of responses.
Yeah, okay. So Li Ming, all good points. And everybody, I would just say, despair not. As with the 3 white wines, you know, things were revealed and explained. And I assure you, by the time we get through the 3 red wines, those of you who are going, this is old world, will go, oh, not really. Okay. All right. So with that, you know, back to what I was saying, you know, this Gamay, you know, I want carbonic maceration. I want Hawaiian punch and Jolly Rancher candy and stem inclusion and tutti frutti. And yeah, no, it's not there. Sangiovese, just, it would be more acidic. It would be close to bone dry and grape tannins in the front of the mouth. You know, even Chianti demands a little discipline on the part.
Did we lose Tim?
I
think
think
he
we did lose
froze.
Tim. I wasn't sure whether it was on my end or
Nope,
Tim's end.
it's on
Um,
Tim's end.
Tim's
okay.
not.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think we lost him. All right. Well, what we're gonna do, Andrea, is we're gonna go ahead and show the Google Earth until Tim.
Tim's back.
Back.
Oh, here you are.
Yeah, the Adobe walls here can be brutal. Okay, let's go to the map. And through the miracle of technology, we go across the Pacific into the state of
Australia.
Victoria,
Yeah.
up into the mountains. And this is Best's Winery. And this is established in the 1860s. It's one of the oldest family wineries in Australia. And, one of the things that the three of us were chatting about beforehand, this, the original vineyard, which is called the Nursery, was planted in 1868, 1867. And these could be the oldest Pinot Noir vines on the planet, which is remarkable. Something the Australians don't talk about, and I have no idea why, is that, for many of the grape varieties, especially rum grapes, they have the oldest vineyards on the planet, right? The Shiraz vineyard, I think, was planted in 1863 for this winery. With the Langmile, which is in the Barossa, their Freedom Vineyard is planted in 1843. The vineyard here at Best for a Pinot Meunier, that I would love to taste this stuff, planted 1868. So really, really remarkable. And also some of the oldest soils on the planet. Anyway, so if you've not had a lot of Australian Pinot before, I hope you will try to seek out more. I know for a long time, one of my favorite New World Pinot Noirs was from Mornington Peninsula by a tiny winery called Yabby Lake. But this to me is one of the most consistent and best Pinot Noirs from Victoria, and just really savory, deceptive in terms of how much stuff is in the glass, and absolutely delicious by itself, but certainly perfect with a lot of different dishes.
Tim, wouldn't you say, and you kept describing how complex the palate was. I find this wine positively exotic, and if
Yes.
some of you are despairing going, how am I going to pick out Australian Pinot Noir? Take it down to simple. It's old world, new world, grape variety, right? And then deduce by process of elimination. I mean, think of the whole West Coast, right? Because of the fragrances and flavors that are utterly unique. I haven't had this wine before, and I think it's just so cool. And if you gave it to me blind, I'd be going, well, it's not Burgundy, I'm not real sure where to put it. Doesn't seem like Oregon, doesn't seem like Sonoma Coast, Russian River, I'd be going down the line, but it's a very, very unique expression of Pinot, albeit New World Pinot nonetheless, correct?
Yeah, good point. And if I can answer Nanette's question, how's it different from Oregon? I touched on that, but I think by then I was doing the max headroom thing as my internet failed. So Nanette, I would expect more fruit and more different kinds of fruit from Oregon Pinot Noir, just more fruit altogether. And then how does this compare to New Zealand Pinot? New Zealand to me is just more vegetal. It's, herbal and vegetal together. And this not so much, but still very savory.
So is this mint element, Tim, do you feel like this mint or eucalyptal element is distinctive of Australia? Or is just...
No, I think, and I only get un poquito, as we say here in New Mexico, un poquito mint. And eucalyptus is Vicks Vapor Rub, okay? And if it's there, it's going to be strong. Somebody who was it, Akeem asked, it seems like it has more age than 2017. Yeah, Akeem, good point. But you know what? I think this is really kind of oxidative, small open top ferments with, probably a lot of racking, and it is a very distinctive winemaking style. So yeah, you make a really good point.
Yeah.
Great. I love these pictures. We're going to go very quickly through these so that you guys can see it, so that we can catch enough time on the last two wines. Lovely family. And
Yeah,
I just love
wine.
this difference between like the old and the current look of the winery. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tim. All right, Evan, back to
Yeah.
you. We're doing wine number 5. Again, Evan, if I don't say it enough, I love this kit selection. And I know for you guys, you're like, are you saying good things about your own wine kit? The thing is, we are constantly tasting wines, making wines, and at a moment like this where you guys are tasting, it's actually kind of our first time sitting down and tasting all 6 wines at the same time. So it's really nice to enjoy a flight like this together with you.
Thank you. And before I jump into wine 5, just a couple of closing thoughts on this wine, which is a very unique wine. And Best's, by the way, as Tim sort of alluded to, is a very unique winery. They are, in fact, the home to some of the oldest vines in the country. The Best Vineyard and the Busby selection, the James Busby selection, are sort of simultaneous in timing, and it is original plant material. From France, obviously some of it repropagated over time on its own roots. You literally, if you go to the vineyard, you have to wear space shoes on there so that you don't potentially trap phylloxera into the vineyard. I mean, it's just an extraordinary thing. This mintiness, I've tasted a couple of their Pinots before. It is unique to that vineyard. I've had enough other Pinots from the area and from Australia that I've not seen it there. It's sort of very much a signature of theirs, very much the way mint would be to Heights Martha's vineyard or BV vineyard or whatever. I didn't see any eucalyptus trees on the property, certainly not next to the vineyards. So it's just inherent there, but it's a really cool winery. They make a killer Shiraz, I might add as well too, which I was interested in getting, but there's like 4 cases in the United States, so we couldn't get any of it. So next time, but worth exploring, and just a discovery wine. Again, probably not something you're going to find in a test anywhere, but certainly recognizable as Pinot Noir, a flavor profile that's unique, clearly New World by nature, and something that you could add into your portfolio of tasting experiences now. So let's talk about wine 5. Wine 5 is clearly a very different wine than wine 4. As you pick it up and you look at it right off the bat, it's got much more depth, it's got much more color, it's got much more extraction in it. It's more opaque. If the other wine you could read through it, this one you definitely can't. And it has sort of that deep rubiness, very much of a purpley rim. Purpley rim to me suggests a combination of coolness, or it could be younger vintage, younger fruit, et cetera, but definitely not showing a lot of age yet. The nose here is one that is quite unique, quite different. It's got a lovely combination of red and black fruits. It shows tremendous freshness in the complexity of it, but it really is sort of a little bit of red fruit, particularly plum, a little bit of raspberry, black fruit across the board, but a lot of plum, and again, sort of a currant type element to it. And while jammy and baked could be perceived as a pejorative here, it simply to me is true of the fact that it's really ripe. That almost like if you picked that really great fruit and decided to either cook it for compote or make it into pie or whatever, but it's not a negative thing. And then there's definitely floral elements here. I think they stand out strong in this wine. Call it lavender, call it rose. There's other things that are there too. And again, sort of fresh, not so much the sort of fresh and dried element that we got before. However, on top of this interesting panoply of fruits that you have, I find that a lot of the other elements here, notably the vegetative, sort of the leafier green character, the purple beet element, the colonut element, which could be oak or the phenylanus, stick strong here. There's definitely some peppery spice. There's some licorice, fennel-y thing going on for sure. And then as you move down, there's definitely a presence of oak. I would say it's sort of in that medium vein that sort of suggests the baking spice elements, that suggests that coffee bean character to it, and a little bit of star anise. There is a slightly exotic note, and then just a little bit of a nuttiness to it there. I do pick up a touch of what I would call a volatility to it. This is something that we find in different parts of the world. It's not a flaw. It's not vinegariness, but there is just a sense of volatility in the wine. And what I like about the flavor, I mean, it's dry, of course, and it's round and smooth in the palate, but it's got some deceptively fun, playful, rough edges on it, sort of a rusticity in either approach or style, probably most present in the wine by virtue of winemaking, which we can talk about later. And it has a nice medium plus finish. and a very, I'd say between medium plus and high quality. It's a very interesting wine. There's certainly, to me, complexity is your ability to have things to talk about, and there is a lot to talk about in this wine.
Great. All right, we're going to go with a very quick poll here as our options come up. We're going to be choosing between Touriga Nacional, Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon. And when we do, for those of you who are with us the first time, /blend just means that it might be a Malbec/Malbec blended product. And we put it there because a lot of times there's usually a lead in the wine when we use that particular grape variety. And then we also have in the old world, Portugal and France, and in the new world, California and Argentina. If you're using our quick picks, you'll see that we don't text you with trying to get down to which part of the United States it is. It's good enough with quick picks to even just get to United States. So definitely thinking of making it more fun. And again, we're here to explain things. So here on the webinar, we can go a little deeper. About 15 seconds, Evan, as we let people power through the poll. What kind of hints would you give someone as they're trying to figure out which grape variety of these three that we have here?
Yeah, well, Malbec in general is going to be even deeper, even darker, even more opaque than this is going to be. And if purple had a taste, it would taste like purple. This doesn't taste purely like purple, and all of that sort of wonderful blue and sweet black fruit that you're going to find. Although if it were blended with Cabernet, maybe you could do that. Cabernet Sauvignon has so many other things. You get more of that graphite-y, currant-y thing. You might pick up some other flavors there. And Touriga is a grape that, you know, it's driven by black fruit. It has strong floral elements there. It's often blended with a few players to be named later that tend to be more in the exotic vein of things. And then obviously you have the associated countries below, depending on what pick that you have.
Excuse
Bless
me.
you.
Oh, I'm getting like the pollen here now. So Evan, as I end the poll and share the results, would love for you to just talk about one other here, which is Carmenere from Chile. How is it not Carmenere?
Carmenere is basically a study in bell peppers or pyrozinic sorts of things. So if you were to have something that had elements of like green bell pepper and jalapeno pepper and red bell pepper, and even those sort of like chocolate coffee brown peppers that are out there, along with dark fruit, that would be a strong thing for Carmenere. It would probably have bigger tannin than what you've got here, even a bigger sense of alcohol and just presence and volume in the mouth, although dependent on style. But what you're really lacking here is, although there is that soft, I alluded to it before, kind of leafy green element and some soft elements of fennel, there's nothing that what I would call peppery here in the sense of bell peppers or serrano peppers, jalapeno peppers, anything like that.
And Evan, I'll have you answer this question after we show the Google Earth, but we're seeing here a dichotomy of answers on the geography. You have 52% in Portugal, and then completely different part of the world, you have 33% in Argentina. So
Right.
we're gonna show everyone where we're at in terms of which part of the world, and Evan, maybe for you to explain why it's one versus the other. So we are going to Europe right now. We are going to Portugal to a place called Quinta do Poeira. And Evan will talk more about it. But Evan, how is this wine more Portuguese and how is it not Argentinian?
Well, if it were Argentinian and it were Malbec, which is obviously the association there more so than any other variety. Cabernets that come from Argentina tend to be big and chewy and harder than this wine is. Malbec tends to be softer and more volume and an even darker color. So if and then if you were thinking that it were you know, I don't know, Touriga Nacional, there's not a lot of Touriga Nacional in Argentina, maybe down in Brazil, maybe down in Uruguay, but not that. So it really speaks to that place. And there's also just this sort of sense of, again, that's kind of herbal, floral, whatever, that is sort of rustic and distinctively old world that you don't really pick up in any other New World spots.
Great. And Evan, as we move on from here, Tony's got a great question. I feel rough tannins, is what he says. And can you describe how this is round and smooth in the context
Yeah.
of this wine?
This wine has got both. So the actual overall profile of the wine is round, but there are these rustic, I talked about the wine having rustic, rough edges there, or rusticity to it. So this wine to me sort of shows the best of pulling some tannin, some structure out of this wine, but it could have gone sideways and gotten really tannic and really intense and really mouth ripping, and they chose not to do so. They chose to play off the more polished element of the tannins while leaving a couple of pieces of sandpaper in there just to be playful. So I wouldn't call this a super big tannic wine, but there's definitely tannin in it. And the tannins, I think, are well managed. This wine actually is foot trodden from the Quinta de Poeta. And they say that foot trotting, so that's to say literally you get in an open lager and you join hands with your friends and you go up and down and you step on the stuff like that. Literally, it's a much softer. So when you break the fruit up, your foot is a lot gentler on it than a lot of these stemmer crusher machines. So the nature of the tannins you're going to get rustic tannin, Touriga, and its kissing cousins, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, tend to be more rustic by nature, but this process tends to be a little bit softer. So Po de Poeta is made by Jorge Morera and his wife Olga Martins, and it is the second wine, Po de Poeta. Poera is the primary wine, and this is generally coming from younger vines on the property, and it is primarily Touriga Nacional, but as I said before, there are other related grapes. So if you think of Touriga Nacional being to the Douro Valley, what say Cabernet Sauvignon would be to Bordeaux or California, then instead of having Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, etc., they have Touriga Franca, Tinta Roriz, Suzao, which is another cool grape, which we know as Vignao in Red Vino Verde, and it makes a very different style of wine. It is their version of a Cabernet blend, if you will. It comes from a terrific vineyard, which you can see in the background here, called the Terra Feta, or the Made Vineyard, which sits in the heart of the Cima Corgo. As you can imagine there, you can see it slopes downward. And if you continue rolling down the hill off of those terraces, you would literally fall into the Douro River. And the Cima Corgo is literally the heart of the Douro River area where all the great vineyards are. This is a vineyard that on the sunnier side, as you can see on the picture on the right there, that fruit goes to Taylor every year and it goes into their vintage port. It is considered amongst the best wines or best grapes that go into Taylor's vintage port. Jorge likes it for the cooler side that's in the shade, which is where he makes table wine from it. So these are the same grapes, by the way, everybody, that go into classic ports, simply vinified dry and not fortified the way they would be if you were making port wine.
Great, wonderful. All right, we're going to go on to our last wine. And if you found this wine very difficult, I just want to give a shout out to folks who are tasting with us for the first time. Don't be discouraged. The point of Master the World is to give you wines from around the world, and over time, you will be more familiar. These are not trick wines. Touriga Nacional is a very, very standard variety, as Evan's saying, that is grown in Portugal in the north.
And now in Bordeaux. It's now legally to be part of Bordeaux.
Great. All right. Madeline, take us home with the last wine, please.
You got it. Wine number 6. And, caboose to your point, Li Meng, some of these wines are to expose them to you. If you've never had dry Douro Red, to show you the capability, the potential of quality, the actual quality being expressed. So don't don't frighten yourself to death wondering how the hell you're ever going to identify Touriga Nacional. So that said, wine number 6, I'm taking it away, and I just reminded myself of its fragrance and its flavor. But let's look at the color. Turn it gently around against a white surface. Sometimes people still don't get the methodology of how to look. It absolutely stains the glass. It's very similar to the previous wine in that it's opaque. The center is, boy, as dark as ruby can get, if it's ruby at all. And then let your eye, if you're assessing hue, follow it to the very rim. And actually, if you were to hold these glasses side by side, wine number 6 has more true ruby red, and wine number 5 has more purple elements. So could be either a difference in barrel age and or bottle age. Hold that thought. So both aromatically and on the palate, I'm giggling because, we're going to get to wood momentarily, but that's the beautiful expression that wafts over me initially, but I won't describe it yet. We will follow the grid and talk about the fruits, which to me, both on the nose and on the palate, are dominantly ripe and blue or black. There's a little bit of red in there, but it's a back note. Take your pick in terms of which specific fruits you want to select, but I would say for sure blackberry, blackcurrant, cassis. Don't overthink this wine. Ripe for sure. I would hesitate, at least at this tasting, for me to call it jammy or baked, because there's nothing confected or cooked about it. It's just about as ripe as you can go without tipping over. Go down to florality, again a back note, but definitely a little bit of dried rose and violet that gives it a prettiness. On the next panel, I find it delicious, so I sneaked another sip. A little bit of more spice than veg. It's important to differentiate the greens, right? There's a little bit of fennel and anise in this that gives it a spice element in addition to licorice. Those are the things that I'm pulling out of this wine. A little bit of organic earth, sort of clay or turned dirt or even dust, if you will. No animal. Boy, those animals are coming up today, but we're looking for them. They're not tromping through. Oak aging, yes. Oak intensity, high. And let's talk about it. Interestingly, by the way, it works with this wine big time. That black fruit is carrying this oak. We can tell just by looking at it that it's a young wine, and that, it is made from what? A small, thick-skinned grape variety, right? Or varieties. The oak influence to me is all about, vanilla, spice. It's like a cappuccino where you have this combination of coffee and vanilla and cinnamon and nutmeg. Oxidative, yes, in the friendliest possible way, and that could be the result of what? Barrel aging, for sure. This is a very straightforward wine. I'm going to say it again. Don't overthink it. If it quacks like a duck, right? So this is one to give you a little confidence, because you'd be amazed how many people will think themselves out of something when they're looking at the picture and reading the book. Structurally, the acidity on this is interesting. Really hone in on it. It's so important that you are able not to confuse between acidity and tannin. The acidity is sufficient. It's not deficient. But at my tasting, it's medium. It's not mouth-watering, but it's just enough to keep the wine cinched in. Alcohol, is high, but cheerfully high. It works in this wine. I perceive it. I feel it in my chest, but it matches the other elements of the wine, both in terms of the intensity of flavor, fragrance, and the structure. Tannin, really hone in on it, because the sweetness or illusion of sweetness on the oak can confuse you. The tannins are not hard. They are there. They are medium plus. I wouldn't even call them high, but they're utterly manageable. And frankly, at this point, there's another thing too. Red wine number 3, we've gotten used to tannin, but it is drying my mouth out a little, my lips. Long finish, complexity, medium plus, even medium, because this is a young wine that is very straightforward and is not showing us layers yet. So, big time promise on this wine. The oak is sitting on it a little bit because of its youth, but I don't doubt, because of the quality of the fruit, that it will integrate and develop layers with time. The poll, please.
Mm-hmm. I love how you're telling people not to overthink it. I also want to emphasize that sometimes, again, on this particular wine, it helps to go back to the Pot de Poera to compare the contrast of wine number 5 and wine number 6 in terms of oak, in terms of depth, in some of these varieties.
Your comments are getting positively, artistically, Meng.
Am I learning from you guys?
Maybe I can retire soon and let Li Meng.
No,
have
there's
his
no
go.
retiring for anyone in this game. But Li Meng is, you know,
Thank
he's
you.
on a vertical climb. My compliments.
Thank you. All
What
right,
else?
so we've got Cabernet, we've got Merlot, we've got Syrah, and then if you are on another path, there are so many big varieties out there. Go ahead and throw that into.
Farriga, right?
And then I do see, Madeline, people are in the new world in Spain. I'm just gonna say that this is about 94% trending with New World right now. So
And you know what? But that's wonderful that you're telling me that, because why then justify it? Be deductive. Don't be so excited that you've got it that you know you switch your ability to deduce off. We are not getting old world tags, which would be what? More earth elements, particularly in the incarnation of maybe forest floor, possibly a little of those animals we've been looking for, Britannomyces, and maybe not quite as much overt flamboyant new oak. Common sense.
right. So-
Very quickly, Merlot tends to be red fruit based, and Syrah will often display smokiness and pepper quality, and Cabernet Sauvignon is Cabernet Sauvignon. So without, you know, drum roll, and yes, it is indeed.
Yep. While we go on to the next slide, I think that
Mhm.
Madeline, it'll be interesting here to distinguish for those who did pick 25% Chile, why it's not Chile.
Mhm.
So in the meantime, here we go. We're going now to the United States.
Napa Valley, there we are, north of San Francisco, east of the Mayacamas. We are in the Stag's Leap District. That is the address of this producer, though it should be said that they are using estate grapes from not just the Stag's Leap, but from their other appellations as well, Howell Mountain, Oakville, Rutherford, and Carneros. So you have all types of fruit going into this, though it leads with Stag's Leap fruit, which is known for what? The quality of its tannins, which I frankly think, you know, they're here. What's very interesting about this slide is look at the different aspects. You know, gentle hillsides, we're not talking, you know, the top of Howell Mountain. We're talking Stag's Leap District, which was founded in 1978 by Gary Andrus, heart of iconic Stag's Leap District. And you know, if we look at the next map, because it's a really cool map, it shows that this area here has big time influence. There's a straight shot with a cool effect from the winds coming in from San Pablo Bay. So we're not just talking about affecting Carneros, you know, here in the south. And you've got that moderating influence. So, you know, it will moderate the heat factor. You've got.
Sorry, I want to just ask Andrea if you can put your cursor onto Stag's Leap. It's that red patch in the very middle. Thank you. As Madeline's talking about it, that's where the Pine Ridge is.
Yep, and we've got the Palisades here, and then it's right in the middle of Napa, and it's just east of the highway, right? And there aren't very many wineries there. What else to tell you about this wine and Pine Ridge in general? I just think this is a beautiful, dependable, memorizable example of Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that is ambitious. Alcohol, extract, concentration, black fruit, lots of new French oak that it handles. But it's not lying to you. It's an open book in terms of its expression. This is the vineyard manager, I believe, Josh Witteman. And as far as the why not Chile, I'm going to pass that to Evan in just a sec because he has nested in Chile and I have not. But I love the shots we're showing. Again, another one of the various aspects of the estate gentle hills. Really pay attention to the mouthfeel of this wine. It is drying tannin, but it is smooth. It doesn't shut the flavor of the wine down. The acidity is just sufficient, yes. The black fruit and some blue fruit is very ripe and compelling, and the oak is unmistakable. This wine is telling you what it is.
And this vineyard looks like Napa Valley. So
It does.
One thought that I wanted to leave with everybody before we let Evan jump in on Chile, and then we'll close on the webinar. And sorry for going a few minutes over today. You'll notice that this Pine Ridge is $65 for the 750 ml bottle. So when we price out and pick wines, and Evan picks the wines for 6 bottles to put in a kit, we will play a high-low strategy and spend more money on certain wines because depending on which part of the world it's coming from, what variety it is, it will cost more. But our commitment to you, our subscriber, is to always at least get to about 180, 185 in retail value, so that you're really getting a value when you pay $80 a month or $90 a month for our monthly kit. So you'll notice that there was one wine that was really of value at $15, and then there's another wine here that's at $65, and everything will just average out to about $30, $35 on retail. Evan?
I don't think the door will be open to Napa at much under this price point.
I was
I'm
gonna
just
say.
saying, you know.
Yeah. Inexpensive
Chile,
Napa Valley, inexpensive Napa Valley Cabernet from an established house is an oxymoron. That just doesn't exist. This is sort of the price of entry these days. This is, by the way, and I concur with Madeline, this is quintessentially Napa Valley. So get this sort of flavor profile, structural profile, et cetera, as a pan Napa Valley wine. Clearly, when you move up with higher concentration of fruit in the mountains, the tannins are going to get a little bit bigger, a little bit more rough, and more backbone to them. When you're down on the valley floor, the wines tend to be more generous, more round, more textured. And when you blend them together, that's where you get an appellation-wide expression that really screams Napa Valley to you. Chile is not monolithic, so it would really depend on where your Cabernet was from. The closest wines that you're going to get stylistically to this would be coming from Maipo Valley, and specifically from the higher portions, Alto Maipo Valley. But Alto Maipo Valley would have, because of the nature, Alto, higher you're approaching the Andes Mountains, would tend to have more acid to it than these would, and there would be a little just more general mountain structure to it. Again, they're more foothills than they are truly mountains down there, but nevertheless, it would be a bigger one. This has a plushness to it that you're not going to find there. Those that come from lower areas, more towards the floor, et cetera, tend to have the plushness, but once again, they also tend to have that more pyrozinic character. So as a general rule, Cabernet and Cabernet blends that come from Chile are once again, to the question about Carmenere earlier, express more of this sort of peppery, bell pepper, green peppercorn character, and not so much of that sort of ripe, gorgeous fruit, except in the Alto Maipo, but then you're going to have the tannins to go with it, like say Almaviva or something like that.
Great. All right. So I love that Sharon got the Portuguese wine right. Good on you, Sharon. Very, very proud of you. And I hope that you guys really, even if you don't get it completely correct, you enjoy it. There's really no stupid question, and every time I sit in on one of these, I feel like I learn so much from these 3 amazing master sommeliers. So thank you, Evan. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Madeline. 2 things to announce. Upcoming kits you don't want to miss. The July 14th Bastille Day celebration next month. I know it's with where COVID things are, lots of folks are going out there. We will have a recording if you have to miss it, and with summer holidays coming up. But we are, spoiler alert, all 6 wines next month are going to be from France. You are going to do a Tour de France with us on Bastille Day on July 14th.
No bicycle.
Really excited about this kit. There are 2 whites, 1 rosé, 3 reds. So that I can give away because you'll see the color from the bottles. Last but not least, I hope those of you who enjoy this tasting, we have wine and spirits kits available as our standard Pinot Noir kit. And I love Becky's comment. Evan is tasked with bringing his cat in a beret on July 14th, if he can get that
Good luck
costume.
with that.
Yeah. So anyways, we are going to have a happy half hour for those of you who want to stay. And we are going to go till about 3 o'clock. For those of you who are not staying, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see you next time. And again, we are so appreciative of you guys all being here. Enjoy your afternoon or evening.